If you haven't heard of Frank Mathews, then you are missing out on one of history's greatest stories. The story of Frank Mathews chronicles a life of crime, drugs, cartels, arrests, and eventual escape from the law, making him one of the most influential black drug traffickers in the world. In this video, we will explore the life of the Black Godfather, Frank Mathews, a man who escaped the law for many years. Make sure you hit the subscribe and notification bell as more exciting videos are on the way. The beginning. Frank Mathews, the Black Godfather, was born in Durham, North Carolina on February 13, 1944. He was raised by his aunt when his mother died while he was a small child. Pee-wee was his nickname, and he went to East End Elementary School until dropping out in the 7th grade. He was arrested at the age of 14 for leading a band of teenagers in stealing chickens from local farms. He spent a year in a state reformatory for youths on allegations of theft and violence. Mathews moved away from his hometown when he was a youngster, first to Philadelphia and then to Pennsylvania, where he worked as a bookie. When he was in Philadelphia, he established relationships with people who would later become his drug distributors, including members of the Black Mafia. He was arrested in 1963 and avoided being convicted by agreeing to leave Philadelphia. Mathews relocated to New York, and by the early 1970s he had established himself as America's most powerful drug lord. His group, which was based in New York, spanned 21 states. He was the only black mobster that was connected to the French Connection heroin pipeline. As he developed his empire, he also battled radical black Muslims for dominance in the streets of New Jersey and Philadelphia. Mathews was dubbed a pioneering behemoth in the heroin and cocaine supply industry by the DEA, and the IRS estimated that he made more than $10 million in 1972. Mathews established two businesses that went on real estate buying sprees in New York and the South. He moved his long-term girlfriend and their 3 boys to a house on Buttonwood Road in Todd Hill, Staten Island, a posh neighborhood frequented by mafiosos. He bet $200,000 a day at Las Vegas casinos, which repaid him by laundering his large sums of dirty narcotics money. He also enjoyed sitting in the front row of high-priced contests. He has a fleet of luxury automobiles. He was flashy and enjoyed living large, with good-looking ladies and expensive automobiles. His drug business was so successful that in 1971, he was able to build a 9-room, $200,000 mansion on Todd Hill at 7 Buttonwood Road. Authorities placed a $20,000 bounty on Mathews' head, which was the greatest reward established by a federal agency at the time, since the feds paid the same amount for the apprehension of a bank robber. The coke side of life. When Frank Mathews came to Brooklyn, he was a 21-year-old criminal undertaker. He was usually involved in illicit activities. Mathews would allege that Italian mobsters were peddling heroin and cocaine and decimating Brooklyn's black neighborhoods. When he discovered that what he made in years could be made in weeks in the drug game, he got bored of the numbers game. In 1965, he began to switch to the heroin drug trade in order to make more money. In the 1960s, wholesale heroin was mostly supplied by the Italian mafia, who had a French link. Mathews understood he'd have to curry favor with someone in the know in order to establish a solid foundation for his drug operation. Mathews had hoped to work with the Gambino and Bonanno families, 2 of the 5 families that have controlled organized crime in New York since the 1930s, but both families declined. Mathews knew Raymond Marquez, a famed Harlem number operator from his days as a number writer, El Padrino, the New York Cuban mafia godfather, and Ronaldo Gonzalez Nunez, a major Cuban cocaine dealer, were introduced to him by Marquez. Gonzalez supplied Mathews with his first kilo of cocaine for $20,000 just before fleeing to Venezuela to avoid an anticipated prosecution in the United States, and the two became friends. He promised to supply more in the future, with the exception of Luis Carrillo, to whom the Italian crime families entrusted New York's heroin racket. Mathews despised the Italian criminal families and avoided collaborating with them. Mathews, cunning and intelligent, became New York's greatest drugs dealer thanks to supplies provided by Gonzalez and Carrillo. Gonzalez was well known to U.S. officials, but Mathews remained unknown to them for some reason. This partnership grew into a lucrative and extensive drug distribution network. Gonzalez began shipping enormous amounts of cocaine and heroin to Frank Mathews from Venezuela. He might have made up to $250,000 in cash. He brought approximately 150 kilograms of dope into New York in the early 1970s. Frank Mathews developed and became one of the largest drug traffickers in the New York drug market within a year after being introduced to the Corsican Mafia. Mathews understood the need for diversification, and he was continuously on the lookout for new sources of drug supply. As long as the goods were legitimate, he was willing to conduct business with anyone. Mathews is portrayed as the new Lucky Luciano of drugs in Donald Goddard's article. As the traditional European-based drug smuggling lines through New York were disrupted, Cubans like Gonzalez assisted in the establishment of new channels through Latin America, with Miami serving as the key hub. From his house in Brooklyn, Mathews managed a narcotics empire, providing most of the major inner-city heroin traffickers with an almost inexhaustible supply. The Mathews enterprise was handling multi-million-dollar heroin shipments by the early 1970s. In 1972, it was reported that he earned more than $10 million. According to the feds, he was in charge of heroin cutting, design, and sale in every major East Coast city. In Brooklyn, he ran 2 large dope mills, one at 925 Prospect Place. Both facilities were well guarded with steel and concrete barriers and automatic weapon-wielding security officers. The enterprise was spread to other large dealers around the East Coast, with multi-kilogram shipments for up to $26,000 each kilogram, in addition to managing the retail distribution of heroin. Mathews Pharmaceuticals Company subsequently expanded to 21 states throughout the country. Mathews oversaw a sophisticated operation that brought pure heroin from Venezuela in 50-pound lots to Atlanta and Boston, sprinkling white powder over Bed-Stuy and other black neighborhoods. The unsolved mystery. Mathews' life began to disintegrate in the early 1970s, courtesy of a Brooklyn neighbor who was a New York City police investigator. While observing Mathews drive luxury automobiles and be visited by individuals bringing paper packages at all hours of the day and night, the detective became suspicious. The cops checked vehicle plates and discovered that they belonged to narcotics dealers, but they had no evidence against Mathews. Frank Mathews summoned key black and Hispanic drug traffickers from throughout the country to a conference in Atlanta in 1971. The feds were informed of the meeting and kept an eye on those who attended. The meeting's purpose was to figure out how to import heroin without involving the mafia. Those in attendance decided to forge greater autonomous bonds with Corsicans and Cubans. They opted to use coke in their operation since it was becoming widely available. Prior to this, the Italians had complete control over the importation and sale of drugs, and hence on who could and could not progress past them. Other dealers were now starting their own businesses. Previously, the mafia controlled the business while blacks sold and consumed drugs in their cities. Currently, black dealers have formed contacts and have taken control of their own territories. This ultimately grew to include not just blacks running the organization, but also local gangs of black people assassinating out-of-town black suppliers, attempting to maintain control over their territory from afar. On Easter Sunday in 1972, Mathews battled with the Black Mafia in Atlantic City, New Jersey, where the Black Mafia assassinated Tyrone Palmer, also known as Mr. Millionaire. In Philadelphia, he was Mathews' major contact. He was killed in front of a crowd of around 500 people at Club Harlem. During the shootout, a large number of people were shot. 5 people died, and 26 were wounded. No one has been charged in connection with the shootings, and no prospective witnesses have consented to testify. The Black Mafia also assassinated 3 of his best troops in the city. During the Muhammad Ali vs. Jerry Quarry boxing match in 1972, Mathews organized another drug dealer meeting at the Sands Hotel in Las Vegas. The feds were given permission to tap his phone lines after the meeting, and he was captured discussing his narcotics operation. In Florida, he was charged with attempting to sell 40 pounds of cocaine. Investigators discovered a massive heroin packaging business during a raid at one of his narcotics laboratories, the Brooklyn drug lab known as the Ponderosa. Police discovered envelopes that were ready to be filled with heroin. Mathews was detained in a Las Vegas airport in January 1973 on charges of tax evasion and drug distribution conspiracy, as he and his girlfriend, Denise Brown, were ready to board a flight. Mathews had made several visits to Las Vegas in recent years, taking bags full of cash to be covertly laundered at casinos for a cost of 15 to 18%. Federal narcotics enforcement officials were waiting for him and his girlfriend at McCarran International Airport this time, and they arrested them both. He was facing a sentence of more than 50 years in jail. Bail was imposed at $5 million at the time, which was the largest bail sum ever set. When Mathews decided to not oppose extradition and return to New York, his bond was decreased to $2.5 million. Mathews' bond was reduced to $325,000 after he spent days in New York prison. Mathews was accused of tax evasion and drug distribution, and he faced a sentence of 25 to life in prison. Mathews was forced to appear in court every week in Brooklyn. He didn't show up on July 2, 1973. Mathews is said to have taken $20 million and departed the country with his girlfriend. He abandoned his wife and children, and their island palaces were never seen again. Months passed, and the IRS arrived at a bank in North Carolina after receiving a tip, only to be told that they had missed Mathews. Since then, no one has seen Mathews or his lady. There have been no sightings, fingerprints, or clues, and there have been no familial connections. To keep Mathews' relatives out of jail, a sum of $325,000 was unexpectedly given in cash as bail. The feds offered a $20,000 reward in 1974 for anyone willing to snitch on Mathews or provide information leading to his arrest. It was the largest prize at the time. Several mafia leaders and drug lords have been compared to the Godfather. He was well versed in the game and all of its nuances. He was an expert at selling large quantities of dope and cocaine, as well as laundering money, transporting narcotics, and producing goods. What do you think of the Black Godfather? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed our video, don't forget to like and subscribe, as more exciting videos are on the way.